Selections from the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. Part 24, Vedanta and its application to Indian life. Section 1. There is a word which has become very common as an appellation of our race and our religion. The word Hindu requires a little explanation in connection with what I mean by Vedantism. This word Hindu was the name that the ancient Persians used to apply to the river Sindhu. Whenever in Sanskrit there is an S, in ancient Persian it changes into H, so that Sindhu became Hindu. And you are all aware how the Greeks found it hard to pronounce Ha and dropped it altogether, so that we became known as Indians. Now this word Hindu is applied to the inhabitants of the other side of the Indus. Whatever might have been its meaning in ancient times has lost all its force in modern times. For all the people that live on this side of the Indus no longer belong to one religion. There are the Hindus proper, the Mohammedans, the Parsis, the Christians, the Buddhists and Jains. The word Hindu in its literal sense ought to include all these. But as signifying the religion, it would not be proper to call all these Hindus. It is very hard, therefore, to find any common name for our religion, seeing that this religion is a collection, so to speak, of various religions, of various ideas, of various ceremonials and forms, all gathered together almost without a name and without a church and without an organization. The only point where perhaps all our sects agree is that we all believe in the scriptures, the Vedas. This perhaps is certain that no man can have a right to be called a Hindu who does not admit the supreme authority of the Vedas. All these Vedas, as you are aware, are divided into two portions, the Karma Kanda and the Jnana Kanda. The Karma Kanda includes various sacrifices and ceremonials of which the larger part has fallen into disuse in the present age. The Jnana Kanda, as embodying the spiritual teachings of the Vedas known as the Upanishads and the Vedanta, has always been cited as the highest authority by all our teachers, philosophers and writers, whether dualist or qualified monist or monist. Whatever be his philosophy or sect, everyone in India has to find his authority in the Upanishads. If he cannot, his sect would be heterodox. Therefore, perhaps the one name in modern times which would designate every Hindu throughout the land would be Vedantist or Vaidika, as you may put it, and in that sense I always use the words Vedantism and Vedanta. I want to make it a little clearer, for of late it has become the custom of most people to identify the word Vedanta with the Advaitic system of the Vedanta philosophy. We all know that Advaitism is only one branch of the various philosophic systems that have been founded on the Upanishads. The followers of the Vishishtadvaitic system has as much reverence for the Upanishads as the followers of the Advaita, and the Vishishtadvaitists claim as much authority for the Vedanta as the Advaitist. So do the dualist, so does every other sect in India. But the word Vedantist has become somewhat identified in the popular mind with the word Advaitist, and perhaps with some reason, because although we have the Vedas for our scriptures, we have Smritis and Puranas, subsequent writings to illustrate the doctrines of the Vedas. These, of course, have not the same weight as the Vedas. And the law is that wherever the Puranas and Smritis differ from any part of the Shruti must be followed and the Smriti rejected. Now, in the expositions of the great Advaitic philosopher Shankara and the school founded by him, we find most of the authorities cited are from Upanishads. Very rarely is an authority cited from the Smritis, except perhaps to elucidate a point which could hardly be found in the Shrutis. On the other hand, other schools take refuge more and more in the Smritis and less in the Shrutis. As we go to the more and more dualistic sect, we find a proportionate quantity of the Smritis quoted, which is out of all proportion to what we should expect from a Vedantist. It is perhaps because these gave such predominance to the Pauranika authorities that the Advaitis came to be considered as the Vedantis par excellence, if I may say so. However, it might have been, the word Vedanta must cover the whole ground of Indian religious life, and being part of the Vedas by all acceptance, it is the most ancient literature that we have. For whatever might be the idea of the modern scholars, the Hindus are not ready to admit that parts of the Vedas were written at one time and parts were written at another time. They, of course, still hold on to their belief that the Vedas as a whole were produced at the same time. Rather, if I may say so, that they were never produced, but that they always existed in the mind of the Lord. This is what I mean by the word Vedanta, that it covers the ground of dualism, of qualified monism and Advaitism in India. Perhaps we may even take in parts of Buddhism and of Jainism too, if they would come in, for our hearts are sufficiently large. But it is they that will not come in. We are ready for. Upon severe analysis, you will always find that the essence of Buddhism was all borrowed from the same Upanishads. Even the ethics, the so called great and wonderful ethics of Buddhism, were there word for word in some one or other of the Upanishads. And so all the good doctrines of the Jains were there, minus their vagaries. In the Upanishads also we find the germs of all the subsequent development of Indian religious thought. Sometimes it has been urged without any ground whatsoever that there is no ideal of bhakti in the Upanishads. Those that have been students of the Upanishads know that that is not true at all. There is enough of bhakti in every Upanishad if you will only seek for it. But many of these ideas, which are found so fully developed in later times in the Puranas and other Smritis, are only in the germ in the Upanishads. The sketch, the skeleton was there as it were. It was filled in some of the Puranas. But there is not one full grown Indian ideal that cannot be traced back to the same source, the Upanishads. Certain ludicrous attempts have been made by persons without much Upanishadic scholarship to trace bhakti to some foreign source, but as you know, these have all been proved to be failures, and all that you want of bhakti is here, there, even in the Samhitas. Not to speak of the Upanishads, it is there, worship and love and all the rest of it. Only the ideals of bhakti are becoming higher and higher. In the Samhita portions, now and then you find traces of a religion of fear and tribulation. In the Samhitas, now and then you find a worshipper quaking before a Varuna or some other god. Now and then you will find they are very much tortured by the idea of sin, but the Upanishads have no place for the delineation of these things. There is no religion of fear in the Upanishads. It is one of love and one of knowledge. These Upanishads are our scriptures. They have been differently explained, and as I have told you already, whenever there is a difference between subsequent Pauranika literature and the Vedas, the Puranas must give away. But it is at the same time true that as a practical result we find ourselves 90% Pauranika and 10% Vaidika, even if much so as that. And we all find the most contradictory usages prevailing in our midst, and also religious opinions prevailing in our society which scarcely have any authority in the scriptures of the Hindus. And in many cases we read in books and see with astonishment customs of the country that neither have their authority in the Vedas nor in the Smritis or even Puranas, but are simply local. And yet each ignorant villager thinks that if that little local custom dies out, he will no more remain a Hindu. In his mind, Vedantism and these little local customs have been indissolubly identified. In reading the scriptures, it is hard for him to understand that what he is doing has not the sanction of the scriptures, and that the giving up of them will not hurt him at all, but on the other hand will make him a better man. Secondly, there is a other difficulty. These scriptures of ours have been very vast. We read in the Mahabhashya of Patanjali, that great philological work, that the Sama Veda had 1000 branches. Where are they all? Nobody knows. So, with each of the Vedas, the major portion of these books has disappeared, and it is only the minor portion that remains to us. They were all taken charge of by particular families, and either these families died out or were killed under foreign persecution, or somehow became extinct. And with them, that branch of the learning of the Vedas they took charge of became extinct also. This fact we ought to remember, as it always forms the sheet anchor in the hands of those who want to preach anything new or to defend anything even against the Vedas. Wherever in India there is a discussion between local custom and the Shrutis, and whenever it is pointed out that the local custom is against the scriptures, the argument that is forwarded is that it is not that the customs existed in the branch of the Shrutis which has become extinct and so has been a recognized one. In the midst of all these varying methods of reading and commenting on our scriptures, it is very difficult indeed to find a thread that runs through all of them. For we become convinced at once that there must be some common ground underlying all these varying divisions and subdivisions. There must be harmony, a common plan upon which all these little bits of buildings have been constructed. Some base is common to this apparently hopeless mass of confusion which we call our religion. Otherwise, it could not have stood so long, it could not have endured so long.